yeah, don't do that. Instead of doing that and looking at lists and lists of idioms in English, why not have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and take a look with me at some of the idioms that you can use in everyday conversation to help you sound like a true native speaker. So to start with, an idiom that I use all the time is make a long story short. Now, usually I would use this idiom when I have an extremely long story, but I'm not really bothered about all the details, and I want to tell whoever's listening the shorter or the more condensed version. For example, you might have had a really stressful day at work and lots of things happened, but you don't want to go into all of the detail. So if someone asks you how your day was, you might say, well, to make a long story short, it was really stressful. In other words, you're summarizing the story and making it as short as possible so that the other person doesn't get bored. Now, if someone has a short fuse, it means that they have a quick temper. In other words, they get angry very quickly. For example, you might have a friend who is obsessed with football. Now, when they're watching their favorite football team, they are known for having a short fuse. In other words, they get angry very quickly when the team does something wrong. Now, this idiom is simply 24/7, which is short for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I want you to try and think what that might mean, because this one will probably translate to lots of languages. But in English, we use the idiom 24/7 when we want to express that we do something all the time. For example, you might be talking to a friend and the friend might say, "Oh, how are you doing?" And you could say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm working 24/7. So in this example, you're saying that you're working all the time and you're really tired because you're working too much. We often use it as well for emphasis if we want to make a joke with somebody. So for example, you're talking to your friend and your friend is one of these big muscle guys, and you might be talking and saying, "Oh my god, you spend far too much time in the gym. You're in there 24/7, as if to say you're in there a lot and you work out too much. Now, easier said than done is a really useful idiom when you want to express that something is not as easy as it appears. Let's take, for example, running a 3-hour marathon. So a marathon is a distance of 26.2 miles. And to run a 3-hour marathon is, well, for the average person, quite difficult. So you might say in this example, running a 3-hour marathon is easier said than done. It's easier to talk about it than it is to do it. Another example might be that your boss asks you to finish a load of work by the end of the day. You might be thinking to yourself, yeah, it's easier said than done. In other words, it's easier to tell me about it than for me to actually do it. It might not be possible by the end of the day. So the next one is fish out of water. Now, if you feel like a fish out of water, it means that you feel uncomfortable and out of place. For example, you might be at a wedding of a friend and you don't know anyone. In this situation, you might be feeling a little bit uncomfortable and you're finding it difficult to socialize because you have no one to talk to. So the next idiom we have is once in a blue moon. Now, if you do something once in a blue moon, it means you do something rarely. For example, you could say, I exercise once in a blue moon. In other words, you are saying that you exercise very rarely. So there we are, guys, and I hope you learned some useful idioms that you can use going forward into the future. Now, feel free to practice them in the comment section down below and tell me any suggestions for future videos or any other phrases that you would like me to explain. Once again, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.